central government employees. Incentives for startups. Startups have emerged as drivers of growth for our economy. Over the past few years, the country has seen a manifold increase in successful startups. Eligible startups established before 31/3/2022 had been provided a tax incentive for 3 consecutive years out of the 10 years from incorporation. In view of the COVID pandemic, I propose to extend the period of incorporation of the eligible startup by 1 more year, that is up to 31/3/2023, for providing such tax incentives. Incentives for newly incorporated manufacturing entities under concessional tax regime. In an effort to establish a global competitive business environment for certain domestic companies, a concessional tax regime of 15% was introduced by our government for newly incorporated domestic manufacturing companies. I propose to extend the last date for commencement of manufacturing or production under Section 115B AB by 1 more year, that is from 31st March 2023 to 31st March 2024. Scheme for taxation of virtual digital assets. There has been a phenomenal increase in transaction in virtual digital assets. The magnitude and frequency of these transactions have made it imperative to provide for a specific tax regime. Accordingly, for the taxation of virtual digital assets, I propose to provide that any income from transfer of any virtual digital asset shall be taxed at the rate of 30%, 30%. No deduction in respect of any expenditure or allowance shall be allowed while computing such income except cost of acquisition. Further, loss from transfer of virtual digital asset cannot be set off against any other income. Further, in order to capture the transaction details, I also propose to provide for TDS on payment made in relation to transfer of virtual digital asset at the rate of 1% of such consideration above a monetary threshold. Gift of virtual digital asset is also proposed to be taxed in the hands of the recipient. Litigation management to avoid repetitive appeals by the department. It has been observed that a lot of time and resources are consumed in filing of appeals which involve identical issues. Taking forward our policy of sound litigation management, I propose to provide that if a question of law in the case of an assessee is identical to a question of law which is pending in the appeal before a jurisdictional high court or Supreme Court, in any case, the filing of further appeal in the case of this assessee by the department shall be deferred till such a question of law is decided by the jurisdictional high court or the Supreme Court. This will greatly help in reducing the repeated litigation between taxpayer and the department. Taking forward our efforts to further promote the IFSC, I hereby propose to provide that income of a non-resident from offshore derivative instruments or over-the-counter derivatives issued by an offshore banking unit, income from royalty and interest on account of lease of ship, and income received from portfolio management services in IFSC shall be exempt from tax subject to specified conditions. Rationalization of surcharge. In the globalized business world, there are several work contracts whose terms and conditions mandatorily require formation of a consortium. The members in the consortium are generally companies. In such cases, the income of these AOPs has to suffer a graded surcharge up to 37%, which is a lot more than surcharge on the individual companies. Accordingly, I propose to cap the surcharge of these AOPs at 15%, 15%. Further, the long-term capital gains on listed equity shares, units, etc., are liable to maximum surcharge of 15%, while other long-term capital gains are subjected to a graded surcharge which goes up to 37%. I propose to cap the surcharge on long-term capital gains arising on transfer of any type of assets at 15%. This step will give a boost to startup community, and along with my proposal on the extended tax benefits to manufacturing companies and startups, reaffirms our commitment to Atmanirbhar Bharat. Clarification in relation to health and education cess as business expenditure. The income tax is not an allowable expenditure for computation of business income. This includes tax as well as surcharges. The health and education cess is imposed as an additional surcharge on the taxpayer for funding specific government welfare programs. However, some courts have allowed health and education cess as business expenditure, which is against the legislative intent. To reiterate the legislative intent, I propose to clarify that any surcharge or cess on income and profits is not allowable as business expenditure. Deterrence against tax evasion. Honorable Speaker, sir, presently there is ambiguity regarding set-off of brought forward loss against undisclosed income detected in search operations. It has been observed that in many cases where undisclosed income or suppression of sales, etc., is detected, payment of tax is avoided by setting off of losses. In order to bring certainty and to increase deterrence among tax evaders, I propose to provide that no set-off of any loss shall be allowed against undisclosed income detected during search and survey operations. It has been noticed that as a business promotion strategy, there is a tendency on businesses to pass on benefits to their agents. Such benefits are taxable in the hands of the agents. In order to track such transactions, I propose to provide for tax deduction by the person giving benefits if the aggregate value of such benefits exceeds 20,000 rupees during the financial year. A few other changes are being made, the details of which are there in the finance bill. Indirect taxes. So, remarkable progress in GST. GST has been a landmark reform of independent India, showcasing the spirit of cooperative federalism. While aspirations were high, there were huge challenges too. These challenges were overcome deftly and painstakingly under the guidance and the oversight of the GST Council. We can now take pride in a fully IT-driven and progressive GST regime that has fulfilled the cherished dream of India as one market, one tax. There are still some challenges remaining, and we aspire to meet them in the coming year. The right balance between facilitation and enforcement has engendered significantly better compliance, and enforcement has engendered better compliance. GST revenues are buoyant despite the pandemic. I would bring in something which I've got to know this morning, not part of my speech, but worth putting in here for the knowledge of the Honorable House. I would like to bring to the notice of this House I would like to bring to the notice of this House that the gross GST collections for the month of January 22 are rupees 1,40,986 crores, which is the highest since the inception of GST. This has been possible due to rapid economic growth recovery post-COVID. This has been possible due to the rapid economic recovery post-COVID, as well as various policy and administration undertaken by central and state tax administrations. Taxpayers deserve applause for this growth. Not only did they adapt to the changes, but enthusiastically contributed to the cost of paying taxes. Special economic zones. In part A of my speech, I have referred to the proposed reforms in SEZs. Alongside, we will also undertake reforms in customs administration of SEZs, and it shall henceforth be fully IT-driven and function on the Customs National Portal with a focus on higher facilitation and with only risk-based checks. This will ease doing business